Right then, postmodernism and education. So this is lesson 2. Lesson 1 was feminism, and in the feminism, it was probably a bit harder actually, and you had that 15 marker. Postmodernism is a bit shorter of a lesson, and it tends to be more. You use postmodernism when you're saying, oh, and another problem with Marxism is um, I've never seen an essay just about postmodernism and education. Now, I'm not promising there never will be an essay, but it's really not common. The purpose of this lesson, which will be shorter in terms of me speaking than the feminism one, is to learn about what postmodernists think about education so that we can use them as a weighing up theory. Okay, so if you get to the end of this and go, yeah, that's great, got it, but there wasn't as much as feminism, no, there won't be because there just isn't. Okay, um, so the first thing I would ask us to do is to watch this 23-minute video of a lecture about postmodernism and education. It's quite difficult, but it is for A-level students. Have a watch of that. I reckon they're better than me, in fairness. You probably watch that and go, yeah, I can scrap your lesson now, Bonnie. But if you don't, like, persevere and I'll explain it to you as well. But do start off with that, please. So, what do we already know about postmodernism? And just like feminism, the booklet's really straightforward. Okay, so it's got all the key information in there, bits and pieces for you to make notes, make a copy, do it on another bit of paper, do whatever you need to do. Okay, but if you can pause this, please, and jot down what you can remember about postmodernism, that would be great. So, pause now. And hopefully, you've got this type of stuff. So, postmodernism. And I mean, if you draw a line down there, post means afterwards, doesn't it? So we're after modernism. So modernism and modern ideas are out of date. And really, we're in this really new, hyper real time dominated by globalization, by technology, and by loads and loads of competing truths. So let's have a little look through. Postmodernists focus on choice, diversity, and freedom. And they're the big three that I always like link to them. They said there's no meta narratives. And I mean, if you think a narrative like a narrator of a play is like a story, there's no, a meta means big, doesn't it? So there's no, the big stories like Marxism, Christianity, feminism, Islam, all of these big ideas that claimed, oh, I know, I understand everything. It just hasn't worked. If Marxism was correct, we'd all be Marxists. We'd be in communism by now, wouldn't we? If any one religion was correct, we'd all be following it. Postmodernists say there's no such thing as truth, there's no such thing as right or wrong. So, what do we do then? If there's no norms and values, and there's no meta narratives, and there's no big story, how do we live our life? Well, they say to basically do what you want. Pick and mix your identity. And that could be from anything to how you look, how you dress, hair colour, physical form, sexuality, sexual identity, gender identity. Um, Postmodernists would argue that we may identify as being gay or straight now, and that may change. We may identify as being female or male now, and that may change. Everything's up for grabs. There's just infinite choice. It's not like the old days where the position you were born into was you for life. So you really focus on things like family diversity as being really positive. We shouldn't be trapped by tradition, pick and mix, chop and change, no such thing as right and wrong, do what you want. So things like sexuality and gender is not being fixed. Now, these are the theories we've looked at so far. Lyotard, don't pronounce the D, it's a silent D. Lyotard argues he's almost like one of the founding fathers, I guess. He's really, about 1984, would start to talk about these big ideas like postmodernism. And if you are ever stuck, use Lyotard. If ever in doubt, he's like went to postmodernist. A founding father, choice, diversity, freedom, do what you want. Foucault, we'll look at him in just a sec. He was the panopticon prison chap. Do you remember? Like surveillance, we are constantly surveyed. And Foucault's a bit more conflictual. Yes, there's lots of choice and diversity, but there's almost like this big brother, state, government, society trying to brainwash us to what to do. And Foucault's saying all those traditions are out of date, rubbish, pick and mix, do what you want. Fitzgerald, do you remember the idea that it is, think about this, about family diversity, it's the relationship between the adult and the child that's important, not the sexual identity of the adults. So whether they're gay or straight makes no odds. It's about how well the parents and children get on and love each other. Judith Stacey particularly talks about how postmodernism benefits women. She talks about the divorce extended family, if you remember rightly, that women have developed really well from postmodernism, that they have more choice now. Geoffrey Weeks, of course, talks about the increased acceptance of homosexuality and that postmodernism has really benefited same sex families. Beck, you look back, risk society. We weigh up the risks. So for anything, I mean, when you came to Portsmouth College, you probably thought, should I go to Portsmouth, South Downs or Havant campus or Highbury or wherever? And you really had to weigh up what you wanted to do. And Ulrich Beck says, we weigh up the choice. We don't have to follow these traditions anymore. We can make our own decisions. Okay, so that's what postmodernism is. Like, how really can we link that to education? Well, I suppose the biggest way is postmodernists want us to have choice. So generally, postmodernists are quite critical of mainstream education as it's really restrictive and it offers little choice. If you think about school, up until your A levels, the biggest, most exciting choice you had was whether to do history or geography or whatever. There's very minimal choice, and you kind of get like pigeonholed into doing what you expected. So Morrow and Tors, mid-90s, 1995, said class is no longer relevant and people can choose their own lifestyle. It's not like we should be little robots and just do as school says. The national curriculums tells schools what to teach, GCSEs are compulsory in state schools, and postmodernists are saying, well, alternatives to schools are going to be better, and they want lots of choice within schools. So this is Foucault. Now, if you can't remember this surveillance panopticon prison, pause this, please, and watch the little clip. Just watch it anyway, in fairness, because it will refresh your memory. But essentially, Foucault is concerned about power and surveillance. And the panopticon prison, do you remember? It's where the armed guard stands in the middle, and all of these cells contain prisoners. There's no doors because the prisoners comply, they obey and do as they're told because they can't see, because it's got these like two-way mirrors, they can't see who the armed guard is pointing their gun at. Basically, Foucault argues that society is like a panopticon prison, and we have to comply because we don't know who's watching us, like CCTV, surveillance, often like things like Google Classroom. You have to click submit, or certainly when it's not now, you're at college, but at school, your parents would have got a weekly email to say your daughter or son didn't submit this piece of homework, and it's kind of like this big brother's always watching you. It might have been reading books and reading logs when you were at school. It might have been teachers making a note about whether you had the right PE kit, for example. The idea being that you're always being observed. And in fairness, I mean, I'll say hopefully, I'm sure none of you will end up in prison like ever. But apart from going to prison, school is the most controlled environment ever. Can you ever imagine a time where you'd have to ask if you can take your jumper off, or if you can go to the toilet, or like have a sip of water? It's almost in any other situation, just really shocking, I suppose, the level of control. Now, you might argue that it's needed to keep a whole number of teenagers compliant in one place, and that's fine. But what Foucault is saying is that school is a brainwashing device where people are bullied into complying and they become powerless. And Foucault thinks this needs to be like smashed up, broken down, and that we can pick our own decisions and make our own choices. So Foucault says school is controlling, school's old fashioned, and it's power hungry. Yeah, the teachers and the principalship or whatever are too powerful, and children are like squashed. Yeah, a bit Marxist, this bit. And the idea is that we should have more choice. They would argue, I mean, fragmentation is a key concept of postmodernism in general. And just like, I mean, basically society is fragmented like this broken glass up here. Society has been broken into little bits. And just like society is in fragments and we're like, there's no one dominant value, we can kind of like pick and mix from all these different facets and parts. Education needs to be pick and mix too. Now, postmodernists say society has moved on from the way we used to learn. Now, this slide is probably a bit tricky, probably the trickiest, and it's about Fordism and post-Fordism. I would strongly suggest you pause this now and watch the YouTube clip because then you'll go, "Oh, I get you now." It's it's not massively complicated, but it's a bit different from stuff. But I mean, Ford, and I mean Ford Motor Cars, basically made its the component parts of cars on a conveyor belt kind of thing. And so, like this I said over here, this assembly line. And so people used to have to just make the bit of the car. If you imagine a factory and you just make this like one component part, yeah, it's one little metal bit, you don't even know what it does. And your job is really boring. And so school should get you ready to be brainwashed, compliant, and bored. Postmodernists say we're now in a post-Fordist society. We don't, most people, or a lot of people certainly, don't work in factories just making one little bit. What they do is that they use their brain, their initiative, and think about self-made millionaires and billionaires. Often they've really good ideas. They've had an app, they've made a website, they've thought outside the box. And postmodernist says education just doesn't prepare us for that. At school, we spend a lot of time doing as we're told. Can I take my jumper off? And learning, learning books and plays and stuff which are hundreds of years old. And postmodernists say this just doesn't work. There's changes ahead, and our school should reflect that choice, diversity, freedom. Okay. Moore and Hiscox said it's impossible to get a national curriculum to suit everybody because society is changing so quickly, and we've all got our different strengths. I mean, for some people, writing an essay is like their least favourite thing in the world, but they're hugely skilled and talented in loads of other ways. All of us have got our own skills and talents. I can write a good essay, but I'm rubbish at loads of stuff. Whereas somebody else can't write an essay, but they're amazing at rewiring a house, plastering a wall, creative, artistic. And postmodernists should really harness all of our strengths rather than just saying, well, do you know what? Unless you can write an essay, there's nothing, you're wrong. It should be, well, you're fantastic at this other thing. Perhaps it's sport, perhaps it's creative ideas or art or something really practical. And we need all of these skills. So postmodernists say schools should be more interesting, basically, where we can pick and mix our own curriculum. A bit like college, but from a much, much younger age. So postmodernists don't like traditional schools. They like choice. Okay, the choice to be creative, the choice to be academic, the choice to be science and maths, the choice to be, I don't know, really sporty, practical, whatever it might be. And so the ideas of education which fit this postmodernist agenda include being taught at home. And I don't mean what the country's kind of like being asked to do at the moment, like do this worksheet at home isn't really home education. Home education is being taught like from scratch indoors, where you're calling the shots. It's not like your mum or your dad printing off a worksheet for your little sister. That's trying to do schoolwork indoors. Home education is completely different. That comes from home. Really liberal forms of education like Summerhill School and Bedales, these are really interesting. We're going to look at these in a sec. These are like alternative, I want to say hippie schools, but I really don't mean that as a criticism. They sound amazing, frankly, but alternative schools. Adult education and lifelong learning. Adults can make more of a choice. And I think we traditionally stuck with this really outdated idea, actually, I would say, that you go to school, you go to college, that's your lot. Actually, people go back and do access courses, they go to university in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. and thrive. And the idea of us doing one job forever is not that realistic anymore. Well, it used to be. Ask your nan and granddad or your great nan and granddad what jobs they did, and you'll find people left school at 15, went down the dockyard, got an apprenticeship, stayed there till the end of their days. That tends not to happen now. We tend to be made redundant. We tend to go back to university and change our qualifications, mix it up a bit. Life is so full of choice and diversity, so should our education. And we often have education and we learn stuff outside of formal education. I know at the moment it's been about, children learn through baking cakes, you learn science through weighing ingredients, maths addition, multiplying recipes, doubling them, that type of stuff. And the idea is that postmodernists say education doesn't have to be in a stuffy classroom with hundreds of years old books in this really boring way. We need choice. So, what I'd like you to do now is research two schools, right? Summerhill, little clip, what's different? Why would postmodernists like it? And Bedales, what's different? What's a Bedales assessed course? I don't want to give you the answer. It's almost like an alternative to GCSE, but what is it? And why would postmodernists like that? Now, both of these schools look wonderful. I've got no doubt about that. But I wonder how much they cost. Marxists like Althusser would say, could a working class child from Portsmouth go to these schools? How much does it cost? Bedales is expensive, but it does have bursaries. Summerhill does not have bursaries. It's less expensive, but there's no bursaries. If your family are on a minimum wage, on a lower income, in receipt of benefit top-ups, you won't be going to Summerhill School. And the bottom line is this type of choice is great, but does everyone have it, or is it really a choice just for the elite? Okay. Bedales, I believe their website does have the fees on because it's boarding. You pay different for boarding, different for day. You pay extra for music, extra for all these types of things. Summerhill doesn't, so you might just have to Google how much does it cost to go to Summerhill School. Okay, and that's boarding, but also does days too. So that's really interesting. Then I want us to think about home education. Now, there's a website called Education Otherwise, and this is their logo. And we're in a funny time at the moment because everyone's been asked to educate their children at home, but it's not actually home education. I'm making a point of that, but it's just really different. So have a look at these clips. Have a look at the clip, have a look at the website. Is it legal to educate? Is it legal to educate your children at home? Well, obviously it is. Do you have to be a teacher? No. Do homeschool children take exams? Some of you might be homeschooled, so I mean, it's obviously implying that you can take GCSEs, but have a little look through. Ask me on Google Hangouts if you can't find the answers to these, by the way. What are your views on home education if you haven't been? Why would postmodernists like it? And obviously, we're going for the choice angle. Would you have liked to have been homeschooled? If you haven't been homeschooled, you went to a state school or a private school, would you have rather have been at home and you decided? Because quite often homeschooling is, well, we're going to go to the beach with the little ones and we're going to talk about, I don't know, the science of tides, of clouds. We're going to do arts. We're going to do some craft stuff. We're going to do some drawing. It's not worksheets. Okay. So have another think. And again, this is all in your booklet. Are there any other ways we can make choice? Think about schools. You might have chosen a faith school or not. GCSE options. Were there any ways it could be further personalised? So if we were in college, you could go around the class and people would have their own experience. So somebody did, I don't know, they went to a faith school or they went to a single sex school or they focused on triple science but didn't do drama, or somebody did history, or they did art and music because they're really creative. But all of us probably has a slightly different experience, and postmodernists would be really in favour of that. So to conclude, postmodernists say Modern education should reflect our busy, globalised, increasingly technology-based society. We need an education system focused on choice, diversity, and freedom. And what's good about that? Obviously, it might be more enjoyable. It might mean that people can pursue their own skills. You know, the stuff I was saying about people might be very creative or very practical or very academic, and all of those are equally worthy. And perhaps postmodernism is beneficial in that way. Think about Foucault. Perhaps schools do have like a weird sense of control. Perhaps perhaps you agree, postmodernists, yeah, it's a strength. They're right, but schools are a bit odd, aren't they? What's weak about it? I mean, if you only went to subjects you liked, would you have gone to all your GCSE subjects? If you didn't go to something really key like maths, I don't mind maths, but I know some people don't or struggle with it. If you never went to maths and then you had a child, how would you work out the dose of medicine they need for their weight? How would you make a cake and try and double the recipe or 1.5 times it? If you don't learn maths, you're going to really struggle, even if it's your personal finances, just like basic living. So a weakness of it being really personalised might be that we just miss out on really basic skills. When you think about school, what would you not have gone to? Would that have affected you now? Now, you've done an essay already this week. I don't want you to write an essay about postmodernism because postmodernism is a weighing up. You use postmodernism when you say however. Okay. I want us to watch this documentary. The documentary is called Summerhill at 70. This image is taken from their website. I want to watch the documentary and write down the strengths and the weaknesses. And I want us to think about what would Foucault have thought about Summerhill. Because on one sense, you kind of go, this is amazing, freedom, liberation, there's no Penobscot prison. And it's a really, really unusual place. Kids do not have to go to lessons. If you look on their website as well, I looked at jobs, not because I want to go work at Summerhill necessarily, but I was just really intrigued as to what the job spec would say. And it basically says kids might not come to your class. You're expected to teach interesting stuff, but children may not come, make no attempt to discipline them, and make no attempt to bribe them. So don't try and say, even like emotionally, oh, I was really sad you didn't come last lesson. Like, leave it up to the kid. Trust them. And it's almost like a 5-year-old's got as much power as the principal. So it's very, very, very unusual. If you're really interested, Google it, because I've seen reports where people have said, oh, I just didn't go to maths, didn't go to English, I left not being able to read. And other people who've said, God, I loved it. I can play all these instruments. I had this wonderful experience. Really artistic, creative, really postmodern, liberal. So jot down your strengths and weaknesses. Would you have liked to attend Summerhill? I thought it was interesting. They don't tend to take kids. I can't remember if it's 11 or 13. There's a cut-off where but it's basically they take younger ones. You can stay there up until you're 18, but you have to have started because they say it's so alternative. You needed to have got in it right from the beginning, really. Okay. So that's your postmodernism. Shorter, quicker. Make sure that this is all complete, please. And next week, it'll be all about revision and this big key assessment. We're running it slightly later because I really wanted to get postmodernism and feminism out of the way, so we've got our theories done. Okay, brilliant. Well done for that. I could keep saying any questions, any problems, just come on to Hangouts. Okay, good luck with postmodernism. Speak to you soon.